As we have participants from 58 countries, let me wish you a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good evening. I am Stéphane Vidry, ILSI Global Executive Director, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the opening session of our 2021 ILSI annual meeting. So before we start with the first session on food system transformation, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Kerr and Dr. Mike Doyle, ILSI Global Co-Chair and Symposium Co-Chair. Dr. Kerr retired last year as Vice President, Research and Development from Cargill, Inc., where he led a scientific organization covering technical service, research, product and process development, scientific and regulatory affairs, and intellectual asset management and food application across North America, Europe, Latin America, and Asia. Dr. Doyle will provide a short overview of ILSI's work. Dr. Mike Doyle is a retired Regents Professor at the University of Georgia in the United States. He has published more than 500 scientific papers on food microbiology and food safety topics and has received many awards for his research accomplishments, including the Nicolas Appert Award of the Institute of Food Technologists. He is a fellow of the American Academy of Microbiology, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the Institute of Food Technologists, the International Association for Food Protection, and the National Academy of Inventors, and he is a member of the National Academy of Medicine. Dr. Doyle will open the symposium and introduce Dr. Maha Tahiri, the chair of the session. So let's welcome now Dr. Doyle. Kerr, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stéphane. And it's a real pleasure to introduce you today to ILSI, which I think, as you know, is a global non-profit organization with a mission to provide science that improves human health and well-being and safeguards the environment. For more than 40 years, ILSI has specialized in providing a neutral forum that brings together scientists from academia, the public, and the private sectors to collaborate together on scientific topics of mutual interest. The resulting projects that ILSI are able to realize are realized through pooled funding and pooled expertise. And this is a key part of ILSI's philosophy. ILSI governing boards all have a minimum of 50% of their representation from the public sector. And this model helps us ensure that the issues that ILSI addresses are of public health significance and that the activities are carried out in a transparent manner consistent with the highest standards of scientific integrity. These that you can, I hope, can see on the screen are the key components of ILSI's scientific integrity principles. All ILSI entities are expected to comply with and are currently totally committed to these principles. You can visit the ILSI Global website for more specific information on each of these principles and on the mandatory policies. These that you can see now are just a few of ILSI's programmatic areas. ILSI scientists and experts have accomplished much and continue to make great progress in these and many other areas. And as we all know, 2020 was a difficult and challenging year for many individuals, for communities, and for organizations around the globe. As COVID-19 changed the way we all live our lives, ILSI continued to provide opportunities for scientists and experts to publish their research in 38 ILSI peer-reviewed publications last year, to attend trainings, and to contribute to 173 workshops, symposia, and scientific sessions. In addition, 65,000 videos were viewed last year on the ILSI YouTube channel. So I really want to take this opportunity to acknowledge and congratulate the ILSI staff and the many scientists that have achieved so much in such a difficult year. And I am now very happy to hand this introduction over to Dr. Mike Doyle, who is chair of the ILSI Scientific Committee for this year's annual symposium. Mike,
well, thank you.
To you.
Thank you, Kerr. ILSI is a global nonprofit. Whoops, I'm sorry. Got the wrong slide pick. We are very pleased to have each of you with us this morning for this the first time that the ILSI annual symposium has been open to everybody. It's not only ILSI members. The symposium will exemplify types of science in which ILSI is interested. This year's annual symposium shall address 8 timely topics in the health, nutrition, and sustainability sciences. In a few moments, I'll turn the floor over to our colleague, Dr. Maha Tahiri, who shall preside over the first session. But first, I want to share with you the list of additional session topics that shall be addressed this week and next. This week's sessions include food systems transformation, the microbiome beyond the gut, innovative packaging, and advances in enhancing the microbiological safety of foods. Next week, we shall address considerations for implementing globally harmonized nutrient reference values. And this, we're fortunate to have this session sponsored by the American Society of Nutrition. We'll also address alternative proteins, greenhouse gases from the food supply chain, which are focused on paths and mitigation and sustainability. And finally, the topic of the day, COVID-19, will specifically address nutritional vulnerabilities and challenges of the food supply. So the full schedule, including the list of sessions, speakers, presenters, and abstracts, is available on the ILSI Global website, which is at ilsi.org. So this year's ILSI Annual Symposium features 12 co-chairs and 33 speakers from 19 different countries. As of Monday morning, we had 780 registrants from 58 countries, which is a terrific example of how ILSI brings together scientists from all parts of the world. We know that many registrants won't be able to attend all of the sessions online, which is why we have decided to record all our sessions and provide to you in a couple of weeks a link so that you will be able to watch each session at your convenience. These recordings will be made available to the general public in early or mid-July. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Maha Tahiri, who is the chair of our first session on food system transformations. Dr. Tahiri is the founder of Nutrition Sustainability Strategies and has more than 25 years of experience in the food sector, with her expertise being largely in research and development that's been focused on health and nutrition. So Dr. Tahiri, I yield to you.
Thank you. It is an honor this morning to be the chair of the first session of the ILSI Annual Symposium. I haven't seen you for a couple of years, so I'm really happy to be back and to be back in this way and to be back in a way that actually brings my two passions together, nutrition and sustainability. As you have seen, I have really put that in action. Food system transformation is truly a topic that I'm happy that ILSI has decided to start the session with, and we are going to have a session actually that brings multiple aspects of the topics together. We will have a first view of the topic from the perspective of how food systems can be resilient, how interactive they can be, and how we could have metrics that could actually help us understand and the difficulties and maybe the solutions to some issues of the food systems with Dr. John Ingram. We then will have a view on innovation and policy from the EU perspective, which is very important for the issue of food systems, because science and policy are two important components in the how we tackle food system transformation. And it is my pleasure then to really have two startups that are truly working in a very concrete way in transforming food systems above and below sea level. One of them is working on cultured meat, and one of them is working on cultured fish. And it's very important that we see food systems beyond agriculture. And I know everybody in the room knows that, but it's the ocean is sometimes forgotten. So without further introduction of the session, I would like to yield to Dr. John Ingram, who Dr. John Ingram is is an associate professor and senior research fellow at Somerville College, University of Oxford. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. So if I could have the control of the slides, please.
Yeah, and maybe just to add also that participant will be able to ask questions during the panel discussion we have later. And so if it's nice if you can put your question in the chat box. You see on the side there's something called questions, so you can put your questions, and maybe for John Ingram, for example, you can start your question putting JI, so Maha will know that the questions are for John. So John, I think you're presenter.
Thank you very much. Are you seeing
well,
a
we
slide?
don't. We see connect to go to webinar, so that may be your desktop. Can you
All right.
Can you put on your PPT?
Yeah, let me try that. Is that looking good?
Yeah, if you put it full screen, that would be perfect.
Yes, of course. You're seeing the right thing now.
Yeah, wonderful.
Are you seeing the full screen, or are you seeing the presenter notes?
We see the presenter.
You'll have to hit that display settings drop down at the top and just swap the displays real quick.
So swap presenter view and slideshow.
Yes.
How's that look? Good.
Looks
Thank
great.
you for your help on that. Have you still got the sorry, lost it again. Could you just guide me back again onto that?
Well, it's only on the. It looks
Okay.
good for us now. It looks perfect.
It looks good for you. Well, that's the main thing. Thank you very much. Well, hello everybody, and thank you so much for the invitation to speak to you all today. What I'd like to do is talk about some of the issues in food systems, particularly in relation to resilience and the need to think beyond sustainability. My first point to make is that I have no conflict of interest in this presentation, so I will just proceed. Let me start with a question. What do we actually want in these three ways? So food utilization, access, and food availability. But of course, we also want a whole range of other issues from the food system. Okay, I'm getting an echo now. Can people still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, good, okay. So we need a whole list of other things from the food system, not least income and profit for businesses, but employment and environmental concerns and issues, other areas stretching across animal welfare and the like. So what do we want? We nearly think about what I call the activities and the outcomes, and we need to balance the what we want with the what we do and the what we get. And the what we do is in this caption at the top, this diagram. Many people will be familiar with diagrams like this, showing the range of food system activities, from producing food through processing, packaging, where many of the audience will be involved, I know, wholesaling, retailing, right the way through to consuming. So that's what we call the food system activities, the what we do. And these give rise to the what we get. Food security in the middle, of course, but also these other issues, the socioeconomic outcomes and the environmental outcomes. So what we need to do is balance the what we want with the what we do and the what we get. Of course, there are tremendous trade-offs across this diagram that we need to be aware of, but so too are the tremendous synergies and the real opportunities to exploit the synergies to maximize the benefit for businesses, for society at large, and for the environment. So where are we today? In terms of global food security, or arguably insecurity, in very round numbers, on the left, we've got about 1 billion people who are hungry. The middle red circle, perhaps 3 billion people who aren't abjectly hungry, but they certainly don't have enough nutrients. The right-hand red circle, perhaps 2.5 billion of us with excess calories, and many of whom also have insufficient nutrients. And so the green circle on the extreme right is the sweet spot, if you will, where we want to be. And you can, add up the numbers as you wish, but it's arguable that perhaps only half the global population has actually got a really, really good, satisfying and healthy diet. So what determines which circle any of us fall into? Well, it's what I call the constraints on dietary choice, and the drivers of what we have to eat. Now, the words in italics are very important: affordability, preference, skill, convenience, preference, and the like all come arguably from the FAO food security definition. And it's important that these are the things that determine what you or I have for lunch. But of course, many of the people in the audience and throughout the ILSI programs are involved in what might be called the food chain. And here we have a range of post-farm gate activities: the processing, the packaging, the trading, the advertising, etc., which give rise to the final calorie and nutrient quantity and price at the shop. Now, as you well know, the people involved in those activities are getting their material from the farm or from the ocean, and this is what actually is the basic calorific or nutrient quantity and price at the farm gate or at the harbour dock. And the people involved in farming and fishing and aquaculture and the like are all ultimately dependent on the productivity and the diversity and quality of the natural resource base upon which they depend. So here we have a very linear system, but the point is, by thinking about what people eat rather than what we grow, we have a much closer handle on why it is, whoever it is in which of the circles at the top. But oh, so simple. No, it isn't. There are massive feedbacks in the system, and these feed forwards and feedbacks are very much governed by a range of environments: the social, political, the business environment, the science and technology, etc. Now, here is one of the many diagrams of the food system. And what we also know is that it is exposed to stresses and shocks. And those stresses and shocks can affect any of these three major compartments. And we will think a little bit about that in due course. So there we are with the food security situation. But we also know, of course, that the food system impacts the global environment, soil degradation, overexploitation of aquifers, a big issue to do with biodiversity loss, marine resources, tremendous overfishing. Many of the resources are fully fished. And of course, there's also pollution, chemicals, pesticides, litter, and those sorts of things. And last but not least, arguably a quarter of all anthropogenic greenhouse gases emanate from the food system. We have a paper came out just a little January 19, big paper in the Lancet called The Syndemic, which is really the paramount health challenge is for us in this century, the syndemic of obesity, undernutrition, and climate change all coming along together. But we've also got some concerns about animal and human interactions, as well we know. First up on my list would be antimicrobial resistance and the way that the profligate use of prophylaxis in animal husbandry is actually leading to this. Now, a lot of the use of antibiotics in animal husbandry is extremely sensible and well targeted. I think we should question the amount. And then the second point is this increasing risk of disease emergence from the rapid changes in the animal-human interface. And here we are, of course, with one of the biggest pandemics of the 100 years, and this is arguably to do with that very point. We also have a host of ethical concerns. You can write what you like on this list, but here are some of the things which I think about. The order of them depends on your worldview. The size of the font on each of these depends on your worldview. But nonetheless, there is this ethical dimension to the food system that we need to think about. Now, for many people, we've been using the phrase, we therefore need to aim for sustainable diets. I personally don't care for the phrase sustainable diets. I much prefer the phrase, let's aim for healthy diets from sustainable food systems.
Yes.
Let me explain what I
that.
mean. A healthy diet, has to satisfy a number of these characteristics. It's got to have the right quality and diversity, and it's got to be safe and affordable and all those sorts of words. But it's also got to be sufficient. And sufficient doesn't just mean a bit more if you haven't got enough. Sufficient means a bit less if you've got too much. So sufficient is the right amount. The sustainable food system refers to the food system activities. Healthy diet is one of the food system outcomes. The food system activities, what we do, have got to be environmentally sound and socially acceptable, but they've also got to be viable from a business point of view. And it's often easy to think of sustainable only meaning environment. But if we're talking about the whole food system, it has to cover the economic dimension of the practitioners, big, small, or medium, that are operating in the food space. So that's what's going on today. But I think we can ask the question, what's coming down the track and for whom? What does the future hold? If we just start by looking at the World Economic Forum Global Risk Reports over the last 3 years, 2019, 20 and 21, we see that there's been a increase in issues. We see the arrival of infectious disease on the list. We still see extreme weather as the top of the list for global risks in terms of likelihood. But if we also look at the risks in terms of impact, we see that the weapons of mass destruction, which was top of the tree in only 2 years ago, has year on year gone down, and it's been replaced by climate action failure, and now this year, of course, by infectious disease. So I think it is very interesting to observe how the perception of risk, the likelihood and the impact has changed over recent years. My question is, where is it going? What will this list look like in a year or two's time? So I don't think anyone would disagree that we need to enhance the resilience of our food system in order to satisfy societal needs. And to do that, we need to think about 4 questions. And one of the big programs we have in the UK is called Resilience of the UK Food System, which I coordinate. And this has gone a long way down the thinking about food system resilience, which I'd like to share briefly. We start with 4 questions. A couple of obvious questions. Well, resilience of what? And resilience to what? Really important questions. But there's a third question. From whose perspective? Is it from my perspective? Is it from a farmer's perspective? Is it from a supermarket manager's perspective? And the fourth question is over what time period? So it's all very well to say we need to be more resilient, but do we mean over the next day or the next year or the next decade or what? Because depending on the answer to these 4 questions, we will be able to set the boundary of the conversation that we have, and hence the boundary of the area of interest. And it's really important in resilience discussions to agree what the boundary is, answer the 4 questions. So how do we do that? Of what? Well, is it actually the food system functioning, that is to say the activities, the machinery of the food sector, where many colleagues on the webinar will be working? So is it the functioning that we're interested in maintaining and preserving the resilience, enhancing the resilience of, or is it actually the function, which is what I call the outcomes? And I would argue from a societal point of view, we're really dealing with the outcomes. Most people are interested in their food security and their job, and they want clean water and all that sort of stuff. And for many people, they don't really mind about the machinery as long as the food is on the shop and it's affordable. So of what? We've got to be very careful to get that right. To what? Well, we can talk about stresses. Stresses are pressures that exert themselves on the system. They're slowly ramping up, they're powerful, they're they need attention, they're not in themselves a surprise, or are we dealing with shocks? And these are surprising things by definition. Examples on the list here you see, we had quite a big shock in the UK a few years ago, as you can imagine, with the referendum, but there are food scares that come and go, as many people will be aware, extreme weather events, geophysical, volcanoes and the like, and of course here we have a pandemic. So these are shocks. Then we need to ask from whose perspective? Well, is it the people who are working in the food sector, the people doing the doing words, the farmers, the traders, the food industry, etc., ourselves as consumers, of course? Or is it actually from other people's perspectives? Is it from a policy's perspective, or a private interest perspective, or a society at large perspective? And then the fourth question, over what time period? We could either have some short-term interruptions. For instance, an IT malfunction might be really, really serious for just-in-time delivery, or food scares can concern the shoppers and they stop buying broccoli or whatever it is, as opposed to the longer-term disruptions, which might be these stresses which are happening over arguably decadal time periods. And do we need to have resilience in the short term or the long term? So 4 questions, really important to answer. So what do we do? Once we've answered our questions and we've set our boundaries so we know what we're talking about, well, what do we do about it? So in our program in the UK, we think about 3 strategies for enhancing resilience of the food system outcomes. Interested in the food system outcomes, the what we get. Robustness, fairly common understanding of the word resilient, aiming to resist disruption. You've got a nice big strong wall all around everything, and that's going to be just fine. We're going to resist disruption to the existing food system outcomes because we like what we get. The second one is the notion of recovery, where we're aiming to actually return to the food system outcomes that we know and love before the shock or the stress hit them. And that's what we might call a bounce back to the status quo. The third one, and this I think is really interesting one, is what we call reorientation. And this is where we aim to accept alternative food system outcomes, either before or after disruption. And this is actually very synergistic with sustainability. So thinking about the environment, the animal interactions, the ethical issues, and of course the food security dimensions, in terms of the metrics we use to measure those, can we actually think about enhancing those in terms of reorientation as well? Can we be satisfied with different food system outcomes? Now, whatever it is of these 3 we wish to do, they all involve reorganization of the food system activities. We need to reorganize the way the food system activities happen. Now, another word for reorganizing is adapting. And adaptation is a key word in resilience circles. So we either adapt the food system activities to maintain or return to the status quo, which is what one does for robustness or recovery, or we adapt the food system activities to transform the food system outcomes into something else, which is the reorientation. So the argument goes that we adapt an activity to transform an outcome. Whatever it is, they both need what we call systemic innovations, and these are innovations that require collaboration across the chain between multiple actors. And it's really important to think of the food system as a system when discussing these adaptation strategies, because there will be unforeseen consequences somewhere else in the system that need to be enlightened and discussed. How do we do it? Well, first of all, we can reorganize the food system activities. We can do the doing words differently. We can farm differently. We can process differently. We can consume differently. Absolutely. Or we can reorganize the food system environments, the drivers which are affecting the way the food system actors are undertaking their work. And there's a range of options here. Third thing we can do, of course, is to reorganize our views of what we want from food system outcomes. And the Inter-Academies panel put out a big report a few years ago, says requires a radical transformation of the system. We need to transform what we're expecting and from the system. And three things they highlight: different farming, better farming methods, changing diet, and perhaps the third one is really important as well, is valuing food for its nutritional value rather than cheapness. And this, I think, is a very important set of recommendations from the report. So how do we enhance food system resilience, given these points? Well, some of you might have seen this short piece was in Nature Food a year or so ago. Myself and a couple of colleagues put in a piece to say, well, we really need to answer the 4 questions in the first instance: the of what, to what, from whose perspective, and over what time period. Absolutely important to do that. Here they are, and what we need to do is get that nailed down. But the answers to those questions are themselves a matter of perspective. And, quote, the pursuit of resilience by one actor may undermine the resilience of another and lead to contestation. So it really does need a negotiation. So in order to negotiate food system resilience, we need this, what we call a new dynamic by decision makers at all levels in the food businesses. Need to be guided by their understanding of the food systems they shape. Answering the 4 questions will help enormously. Need to be aimed towards helping a new power, balance of power, working with and through a more inclusive institutions, more people, more institutions. Needs to be grounded, recognizing the power of interactions between the stakeholders and the system actors. This is the negotiation territory. And it really needs to be thought of as a negotiation. We need to think about negotiating food system resilience, not just doing it, not just overlaying it on our current actions. And to close, there's 2 points that are necessary. First of all, we need to begin to shift from what I call a historical adherence to shareholder capitalism to a widening acceptance of what's been termed stakeholder capitalism. Mm-hmm. And this is going to require a call for all the stakeholders to come to the table and to negotiate that resilience. So in summary, we have a complex system. There are a series of activities, the what we do, a series of outcomes, the what we get. If we wish to enhance the resilience of the food system outcomes, which is arguably what society is after, we need to understand how to adapt the activities so that we can transform the outcomes in a way that is better for health, for business, and for the planet. Thank you very much.
John, it's just too bad that we can't hear the clapping now when there are really, really good presentations happening. Phenomenal presentation. Thank you. I think we will have the conversation in time, but I just wanted to say you really have a way of deconstructing the issues of the food system, deconstruction like the philosopher Jacques Derrida concepts that really helps understanding the issues. I particularly liked your deconstruction of sustainable diets into really 2 major things, which is healthy diets and sustainable food systems, which is very major in ways, in the sense of we really can tackle those 2 in a very efficient way if we separate them, because the measures, the stakeholders, the policy makers are not the same if we want to tackle either. So
sure.
I'm hoping we will have a really good conversation on that topic when we get to the discussion.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move then to our next speaker, who is Karen Fabbri. Karen is deputy head of, Dr. Karen Fabbri is deputy head of the Unit of Economy and Food System in the European Commission in Brussels. And Karen was going to talk to us about research and innovation policy as a key enabler in the EU Farm-to-Fork Strategy and the wider Green Deal. Welcome, Karen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'm honored to be here with you today. Before I start, I'd need some instructions on how to actually share my screen so that you can see the PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, so
Stefan.
we can see your screen now.
Oh,
so just
yeah.
it's just the GoToWebinar web browser window is what we can see. So I think you just might need to drag your PowerPoint presentation to that screen.
Okay, so if I just click on the PowerPoint presentation, will you see it, or do I have to
Well, go ahead and click on it and we'll see.
Can you see that?
No, I think you do need to drag it to your other screen.
Okay.
There we go. Now we can see it.
Oh, all right, perfect. Okay, well, I'll just scroll up to the top and put the, oh, wait a minute. Oh no, I just lost it. There we go. Okay, sorry. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm delighted to be here with you today to brief you on our, oops, this, I don't know how to get rid of this. No, I don't want to leave the seminar. Let's try this. Sorry, I just can't get this window out of the way, but that's fine. So I'm happy to be here to talk to you about what we're doing in the European Commission in terms of research and innovation policy, driving sustainable, healthy, and inclusive food systems. So my talk of today is going to take you through some of the highlights. So the European Green Deal and Farm-to-Fork Strategy, the key role of research and innovation in enabling food system transformation, our work currently in Horizon 2020, the Green Deal call that recently closed, and the work we are doing to build up Horizon Europe, which is our next research and innovation program. So firstly, just to set the policy context, so we are now quite fortunate that we have there is much impetus now in Europe towards a European Green Deal. This is a new policy framing. These are new policy priorities of the Commission, which include a basket of actions, a basket of strategies from clean energy all the way to green financing green projects, looking at the circular economy, to make Europe the first climate neutral continent. So one of these key strategies is the Farm-to-Fork Strategy, which focuses on sustainable food systems. And there are others that are, of course, very relevant, such as the biodiversity strategy and even the circular economy strategy. So what does the Farm-to-Fork Strategy aim to do? It's really a means to bring together, let's say, member states, stakeholders towards transforming food systems for sustainability, health, and inclusion. At the heart of it is really the Sustainable Development Principles, so the need for economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. Key challenges include, for instance, healthier diets and to reduce the amount of obese and overweight people, improvements in animal welfare, improvements in social rights for workers in the food system, and food affordability. Environmental aspects include tackling climate change, of course, protecting the environment, preserving biodiversity, reducing food losses and waste, and fostering really a circular bio-based economy. And of course, there's also the economic sustainability aspects, such as creating new business opportunities, fostering a just transition, and fair incomes. Overall, the Farm-to-Fork Strategy has a number of goals. The climate footprint is very much at its heart. There is also an aspect that really brings in the international or global ambitions that is present. There's it also highlights the need to tap into new opportunities and really to build resilience across the whole system. Now, the farm to fork strategy has quite a lot. It's very, I'd say, at strategic level, the objectives are very wide-ranging. However, it does pick out specific targets that we need to achieve by 2030. And some of these are the following. So we will call for the reduction by half of the overall use and risk of chemical pesticides, and to reduce the use by 50% of more hazardous pesticides. There's also targets to reduce nutrient losses by half, while ensuring no further deterioration in soil fertility, and also reducing the use of fertilizers by at least 20%. So these are ambitious goals. We're also keen to reduce the sales of antimicrobials for farmed animals in aquaculture, and there's also a target of up to 25% of organic agriculture in Europe. So the farm to fork strategy contains a total of 27 actions. So it's really a huge basket where there's many activities and actors busy to roll out either new actions or upgrading existing actions. And this is just an attempt to mention a few here. So there is we are foreseeing revisions of existing legislations, for instance, on food contact materials, on date markings. There will be a new legislative framework for sustainable food systems that is being built up, and that's by 2023. There will be work, or there has been work already, on the European Code of Conduct for Responsible Business and Marketing. There's mandatory front of pack nutrition labeling to guide healthy choices. There's sustainable food labeling. And of course, there's EU level food waste reduction targets, and much more. There's also a set of what we call non-actions that are relevant to the farm to fork strategy. For instance, there is a strategy on algae that isn't specifically within the context of the farm to fork strategy, but is very relevant. So there's so much activity taking place now that is relevant to food system transformation, not just for Europe, but also in the global context. So this brings me to the next point, which is our work on research and innovation policy. So we launched an initiative called Food 2030. This is basically our research and innovation policy framework that we've been built up since 2016. And this was really a first attempt to mobilize our own scientific communities and also other commission services to start talking about food system transformation and the fact that it was an urgent and complex issue that needed to be tackled. So we did a lot of consultation work, many events, we brought in many experts, and we built this vision up together. So the vision tries to highlight 4 priorities through which research and innovation policy could make an important contribution. And the first of that was to move towards nutrition for sustainable and healthy diets, and that includes all aspects that relate to health, also food safety. Another priority was to build up climate smart and environmentally sustainable food systems. Another one was circular and resource efficient food systems. And finally, innovation and empowerment of communities. And by communities, we mean neighborhoods, we mean regions, cities, towns, it could be rural areas, but really focusing on places where people live and work, so the place-based aspect. And how are we going to address these priorities, which needed to deliver co-benefits, really? Well, it was through different drivers. So by promoting research breakthroughs, by promoting innovation and investment, open science, and of course, international cooperation within research and innovation. And that's how we set up our Food 2030 visioning. And then as we were working towards the new framework program for research and innovation, which is called Horizon Europe, which just began, I'll say a little bit more about this later, we decided to focus on a number of areas. And these are our 10 Food 2030 pathways for action that we released last October on the occasion of World Food Day. And all of them, why did we pick these? Because we felt that these were really leverage points where research and innovation could really deliver transformative change. And I'll just read them out. The first is urban food systems. The next is dietary shift and alternative proteins. We have a pathway on smart personalized nutrition, another one on the digital aspects of food that we call food and data. Another one that specifically focuses on transforming food systems in Africa, because we do have a high-level policy dialogue between the EU and the African Union. We also have a pathway that deals with food waste and circularity, resource efficiency in food systems. Another pathway that is directed to blue food, or food from oceans, from seas and oceans. Because often this aspect is not sufficiently covered. It's kind of embedded in many of the other themes, but it really needs to be highlighted as an area. There's also work we're doing on the microbiomes of food systems, microbiomes that connects the microbiome from let's say farm to fork. And we have a pathway on food system science and governance, because we feel that much innovation also has to be relevant to institutions, so institutional innovation, governance innovation, to really help transform the system, and these actors to work together, just as John Ingram mentioned. And the last pathway is related to food safety and traceability. And all of these pathways, as I mentioned, they were also chosen because in bringing them forward, we felt that they could all deliver on these 4 priorities. So all of them deliver a number of co-benefits to these 4 priorities that I mentioned, the inner circle there, the nutrition, the climate, the circularity, and the innovation for communities. And all of this fits within Horizon Europe because we are deploying this concept, we are deploying calls for proposals that are related to these 10 different pathways. And not only are we deploying research and innovation calls for proposals, we're also working very closely with member states and with other actors, including the industry and civil society organizations, to really align and leverage, so align research and innovation agenda and leverage investment in these particular areas. Now I'm going to mention our latest call. This is actually quite an impressive call. We had a €1 billion call launched related to the European Green Deal. The call closed in January of this year, and we're just now coming out of the evaluation process. And now within that call, which was quite ambitious because we were really looking to foster systemic solutions that would demonstrate tangible results and, bring in citizens also. And within that context, we had a farm to fork topic that actually got the largest number of proposals, an outstanding a number of proposals. It was a topic that was for 74 million, and within that topic there were 6 subtopics. So one was basically all of them were demonstrators. So achieving climate neutral farms was one. Achieving climate neutral food businesses was another. Reducing the dependence on pesticides and reducing nutrient losses was another demonstrator. Then reducing the dependence on antimicrobials. Another one on food losses and waste, and finally one on sustainable healthy diets. So we received 260 proposals for this topic, and the evaluations have just completed, and so we'll be notifying the lucky winners, the successful proposers shortly. But it just shows how much interest and how much need there is to really advance on these topics. So these projects will probably start sometime before the end of this year. So a few words on Horizon Europe now, because Horizon Europe is the new research and innovation policy framework for the next 7 years. So it began in 2021. In January of this year, it will continue on to 2027. This is setting up the Horizon Europe program is a lengthy task. There's many iterations with member states, with stakeholders. There's a legal basis, there's an orientation document, a strategic plan, and a work program. So there's a, yeah, it's just to say that it's quite a lengthy process to get us to where we're at today. We are now about to launch our own work program very, very shortly, within the next weeks. But before I go into that, I'm just going to mention that the structure of this Horizon Europe has 3 main pillars. The first one is really, Pillar 1 and Pillar 3 are more about bottom-up initiatives. So there's the Excellent Science Pillar, which is part of the European Research Council, so, and it also includes European infrastructures and fellowships that are related to the Maria Skłodowska-Curie actions. So these are bottom up in the sense that we give overarching areas that are of relevance, and then proposers submit their research, which is purely evaluated on excellence. In Pillar 3, it's also bottom up, but it's what we've now launched the European Innovation Council. There's also the need to use this pillar to foster innovation ecosystems, and it's through it that we also program the work of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. Then we have Pillar 2, which is where we address the global challenges like health, culture, creativity, civil security for society, all the digital industry and space aspects, the climate, energy, and mobility, and finally, the area where I'm coming from, say, which is food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, and environment. And so it's there that I'm going to now drill into to tell you a bit what we're doing on food systems within that context. So that's considered Cluster 6, and under Cluster 6 we have 7 what we call intervention areas. Food system is 1, and with this image or this table rather in light green is just to show that these 10 pathways that I mentioned before is what we're weaving into the food systems intervention area that will then be deployed through Horizon Europe Cluster 6. So the other intervention areas consist of environmental observation, biodiversity and natural resources, agriculture, forestry and rural areas, seas, oceans and inland waters, bio-based innovations and systems of the EU bioeconomy, circular systems. So under food systems, we work very, very closely with all of these other intervention areas, but in particular with the agriculture, forestry and rural areas, because it's that intervention area that is really looking into all the primary production related food system transformation work that needs to get done, also like agroecological approaches or regenerating soil or reducing pesticides. So we're working very, very closely together on these issues. Back to our Food 2030 pathways, just to say that the approaches that we are deploying through the Horizon Europe program need to be systemic. This means they need to involve all the main actors across the whole food systems to identify and assess and develop strategies together. And we are very much putting at the center of the research and innovation work place-based approaches to test, to demonstrate, to deploy, and to partner. Another thing I'd like to mention is that under Horizon Europe, we are now fostering larger partnerships to kind of federate many of the initiatives that are already out there And we do foresee a candidate food systems partnership, which is entitled Safe and Sustainable Food Systems for People, Planet, and Climate, which should start in 2023. So the objective there is really to align and boost research and innovation investments to transform food systems for co-benefits. That could be, of course, needs to be relevant with the Farm to Fork strategy and other Green Deal related priorities. The current convening platform is the European Commission's Standing Committee for Agricultural Research, which has a food systems working group. Now, the Standing Committee for Agricultural Research brings together ministries from all over Europe that are programming research and innovation policy within their own countries. So we are really working very closely with the member states on this partnership. And with this, in this respect, thematic stakeholder workshops and a co-design process has been ongoing, and we will have further workshops this year, and we expect to launch what we call a coordination and support action shortly to further support the setup of this partnership. Another thing I'd like to mention related to Horizon Europe is the concept of missions. These are can be equated to, it's the European Green Deal's version of sending the man to the moon. So we have 5 thematic missions that we have been building up, and these go beyond research and innovation because they aim to also bring on board, explore synergies with other financing instruments and see to which extent policy solutions can also be tweaked or found to really make large leaps forward. One of the missions is on adaptation to climate change, including societal transformation, which has quite a bit of relevance also to food system transformation. There's one that is dealing with cancer, which also, I mean, all of these missions are really relevant to food systems in one way or another, because the cancer mission is also likely to have some elements within it that will explore, for instance, prevention strategies. We have a mission on healthy oceans, seas, and coastal waters, another one on climate neutral and smart cities, and last but not least is one entitled Soil Health and Food. Caring for soil is caring for life. So much activity is going to be taking place around these issues in the next years in Europe. A few key milestones and next steps since the beginning of this year. So I mentioned the Green Deal call that was launched in January, and projects should be starting before the end of this year in relation to those. We've recently launched a study tender on food systems investment gaps. So why is it that in some countries we see much greater investments in research and innovation than others, and which parts of food systems can we invest more in terms of research and innovation? How can we get better return on investments? So this is at the heart of this study that the outcome is expected in end 2021. We've recently launched an expert group, an EC high-level expert group, as a contribution to the UN Food Systems Summit that is really looking into how we can strengthen the global science policy interface to meet the ambitions that the summit will set forth. This group will be having, so we're setting up an EC stakeholder dialogue on this global science policy interface on the 29th of April, so that's coming soon. I hope that you'll all join us for that. And then the outcome of this expert group process will be presented during the summit's science days in early July, and we expect to have some kind of consultation process throughout the summer to then explore options for what this, let's say, renewed or reinforced global science policy interface could be by May of next year. We will be launching our first Horizon Europe calls shortly, anytime. With respect to these, we will be having info days on the 25th to 28th of May. So if you're interested in any of the topics that we're setting forth, please do take part in the info days. Our Horizon Europe program is open to all countries, so please do join us for that. We also have our flagship event coming up called R&I Days on the 23rd and 24th of June, where we have a session on food systems. And of course, there is the UN World Food System pre-summit and summit events coming up, and the Farm to Fork conference that will take place on 14th and 15th of October of this year. And we are joining forces for the first time with our colleagues in DG Agri and DG Santé to have a joint event on food systems this year. So in summary, the EU Farm to Fork strategy and Green Deal really sets a new ambition, and it comes in at a very timely moment, if I can connecting this up to the UN Food Systems Summit, that policymakers really do look at research and innovation policy to enable real food system change for co-benefits, and that the Commission is putting in place EU funding and policies to support these kind of research and innovation investments and communities therein. I stop here. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Am I still muted? Well, thank you very much, Karen, for the presentation. It's very good news to see how the EU is engaged in the topic. Very good news to see the ambitious Green Deal. I'm a European who lives in the US, so I always look at the EU with an eye of admiration when it comes to setting goals in this topic. I would be very curious in the conversation to have your perspective on, I know you talked about biosolutions, but I had the impression that it was more in the area of insecticide, pesticide, and we're going to have two companies actually talking about the bio-revolution that is happening in the food industry and all the technologies that are going to revolutionize our food. And so we'd love to have the perspective of the EU on that type of innovation and the regulatory hurdles that might either help them or be on their way. So we will see after their conversation. We are going to open the session for a general discussion, and we will be joined by Dr. Cheng Fan. He's a chair professor and dean of the Academy of Global Food Economics and Policy, China Agricultural University. But prior to that, he was he served as Director General of the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, from 2009 to 2019, which probably many of you have known him in that capacity. Thank you for joining us for the conversation that I'm hoping to be very lively and very constructive.
Thank you, Maha. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't have any PowerPoints. The new fashion is you present without PowerPoints. So I'm going to set the new trend.
And this is a conversation, so you don't have to
right.
You don't have to present anything.
This is some sort of my reflection. I think this is a wonderful set of presentations, from John's concept about the resilience to Karen's policy, EU policy, then to the two new startups on alternative proteins. Now, let me just comment each presentation one by one. John's presentation is great. I think he really emphasized the importance of resilience. After COVID-19, the resilience has become so important, and we have ignored the resilience for so many years, for so long. Now, I think he introduced a very interesting concept, that is the negotiating for resilience, to bring different stakeholders together. I think this is the right approach, but the problem is each stakeholder has different power, different capability. So how can you bring them together to really negotiate? So John, you can answer me on that. Otherwise, I think your presentation is wonderful, it's great. Now, in Karen's presentation, well, obviously, Green Deal is a great deal. You know, every country is looking, every country is looking at that as like a star, as a model, even here in China. You know, we discussed the Green Deal quite a bit. And we also discussed the initiative from farm to fork for food and agriculture quite a bit. You know, the Europeans, the EC, the European Union has really set up a good example for many other countries to follow. You know, starting from reforming the subsidy policy to the new Green Deal to set up specific targets for sustainability, nutrition and health, rural development. I think many countries really need to look at that very carefully. Now, my question to Karen is, in one of the PowerPoints, you have a separate sort of food system and then agricultural production and so on. In my mind, they should be together, the agri-food system. So how can you separate agricultural from food or vice versa? Because majority of agriculture production is food production, and you know, and the food system includes production, as John said, you know, everything, activities, actors, players, in the whole value chain. So that's the question. I really like the emphasis on innovation part, Karen, innovation, the research and innovation. Now, my question is whether the European Union will be able to set up the right regulation to allow certain innovation to really be commercialized. For example, the one discussed by Patricia and Simon. So, and then Patricia and Simon, I'm really a big fan of, you know, Impossible Burgers, artificial meat, and so on. You know, I liked it very much. Actually, I tried many times when I was in Washington, funding farmers. Yeah, they serve very good hamburger. So I really like it. Now the question to you two, one is the cost. You know, now it's still very costly, particularly the one based on animal cells instead of plant-based artificial meat. So whether we will be able to bring the cost down substantially, and that meat requires also another energy. Is it really sustainable? So we need evidence to demonstrate whether it's viable for consumers to consume all these sustainable foods. Now, so based on these 4 presentations, so it's clear to me that we need innovations, whether it's a biotechnology, whether it's a digital. I think we have not discussed about a digital innovation here. Mm-hmm. So biotechnology, obviously, you know, not of the new, so game-changing solutions, you know, the synthetic biotechnology, you know, single-cell proteins, all this are really, could be really groundbreaking. Now, the digital innovations is another game-changing sort of technology. If you combine these two together, it's just a tremendous. So biotechnology or synthetic biotechnology and a digital revolution. You know, CGI is doing another research on breeding. So if you can use a modern digital technology and combine that with breeding to really change, you know, let's say how the biology work, that's really game changing. So combine these two together. Again, whether we have the proper regulation to allow that to happen. Now, I also think of institutional policies we have not discussed, and Karen discussed that a little bit. So policies and institutions, and bundling technology and institutional innovations together. Because sometimes, you know, if we just pursue technology without considering a policy and institutions, and as vice versa, it's not going to work. So bundling all this together is a way to go.
Absolutely.
So, yes. So finally, I just have one comment. If we wanted to change all this, we must change our behavior, to change our mind. So as a consumer, whether we'll be able to accept, that's artificial meat, you know, I do, but many people are still concerned. So can we change our mind to accept something new, including GM foods? I'm open to that too. And then the food waste and our diet. John mentioned that we need healthy diets from sustainable food system of production. I agree, but I think even as a consumer, we should also take into consideration of sustainability when we eat. So when we eat next meal, let's think about it. You know, if we eat too much red meat, it's not going to be harmful. It's not only going to be harmful to our health, it is also going to hurt our environment. So yes, our diet, healthy and sustainable diets. It's not just healthy diets from sustainable food production. So absolutely. Back to you, John.
I want to give the speakers actually the opportunity to address your questions.
Great.
So
I think that's all I had. I want to thank you. I mean, this is a
thank you very much for your very thoughtful.
Back to you.
For your very thoughtful thoughts and questions. And so, John, you had a question that was directed to you. We don't hear you.
How do you hear me? Help me, help me, help me. This is a problem we had before.
No, that works.
Now we hear you.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, Shangen. Very nice to see you again. It's wonderful to have a conversation with you because we always find something to disagree about. What I do challenge is the fact that you say we need a sustainable diet. The point I was trying to make is that well, I think we've agreed we need a healthy diet. I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that. But what do we actually mean by a sustainable diet? But that's why I slanted it towards the sustainable food system from which the diet is derived. And as I made the point, the sustainable food system requires it to be not only environmentally sustainable and socially, but also economically sustainable. Because if it doesn't work economically, it's not going to work. Anyway, we can continue to discuss that. The main question you asked, I thought was absolutely spot on. Stakeholders have different degrees of power. How do we get them all together? I think it's fair to say that this idea of negotiating resilience, it's first of all, it's an evolving concept. Okay, we haven't got it sorted out. We've just realized that this is something we need to do. It includes enhancing our thinking about process of discussion, about inclusivity and participation. What do we mean by these words? It also isn't necessarily aiming for consensus. What it's aiming for is a movement towards a different place. So this is what I was referring to as the transformed outcomes. Are we able to accept a reduced meat diet using these wonderful new products our colleagues were talking about? Are we able to adapt our consuming to these new products in order to transform the outcomes of the system for better health, better environment, and all the points that Patricia and Simon were making? But then I think the real point is that the discussion about enhancing resilience, it's to foreground the key trade-offs and power dynamics that you put your finger on, and it expects iteration and development over time. And I think food businesses, who is the community we're speaking with today, can adopt, have to start by adopting a systems approach to understand and plot who are the stakeholders in the system that matter. And the challenge is to separate a subjective understanding of the word that matter to an objective understanding. What do you think?
Yeah, I think inclusiveness is good, but I think enhancing their capacity, that's of smallholders or informal workers in the food sector, you know, educating them, empowering them, give them political rights,
yes,
or whatever rights, probably is also very critical.
I agree. but how does that community have voice? And
Well,
it needs a champion.
Yeah, well, there are lots of examples from India.
Exactly. So it's that's the way one engages the communities. Anyway, I hope that goes towards answering the question.
As you have the floor, John, I have a question from the audience for you.
Sure.
From Anna Larty. She thanks you, of course, for the presentation. Everybody enjoyed your presentation. John mentioned that we should rather talk about healthy diets and not sustainable diets. I think we should not limit sustainable to carbon emissions alone, but if the diet is not healthy or is contributing to disease and the quality of the diet, we cannot call it sustainability. We should be talking about healthy and sustainable diet, not just sustainable production. Consumption drives production.
Yes, consumption drives production. Interesting that that phrase has come out. I'll come to the question in a moment, but one of the points I was thinking about as Karen was talking, a big emphasis on this farm to fork, because consumption drives production. Maybe we should really be thinking about the fork from farm, and what that does is it puts at the top of the page what determines what we eat, which was one of the graphs I used, and it puts at the bottom of the page, not to diminish its responsibility in any way, its importance in any way, but to say if we're interested in determining what people eat and why, we need to look at the determinants of consumption rather than the determinants of production. And this is actually it's addressing and balancing up what is currently and historically a very productionist paradigm with more of a consumption paradigm. And what we need to do is manage consumption and manage demand, not perpetually aiming to meet demand. Because if we can't manage demand, it's going to be a runaway train. But just to come back to the point, to say yes, we can debate, as Shangan was doing, is it a sustainable diet or is it a sustainable food system? I think we can agree to share all of these words, providing we understand what we're all saying and we all understand what each of us is saying. I'll leave it for others to discuss now.
Okay, I'm moving to, I'm doing it by the order of my screen. I'm moving to Karen. If you would like to address Dr. Shengfen's question for you. I do not remember it, if you have it.
All right, thank you, Maha. Shengen, hello, nice to see you again also. And thanks for the questions. In relation to this issue that John raised, should we be speaking about only healthy diets as an outcome? I tend to agree with what was said by Shengen and the person from the audience, that we need to also build in the sustainable aspects within the diet, because if I take the point of view of nutritionists that are giving out nutritional information, until recently their main preoccupation was to give healthy diets. Now, it doesn't mean that healthy diets are the most sustainable. So how can we provide nutritional information that is at the same time a win-win, at the same time healthy and sustainable? I'm sure we can do it, but we're not doing it now. So that's why I think it's important to keep the two keywords together, which is why we developed this pathway on sustainable healthy diets, not sustainable or sustainable or healthy diets, but really, you can't have one without the other. So that's my comment on that point. With respect,
may I please say something about that, because I'm a nutritionist and also working on innovation. I think healthy diets are healthy diets, and then sustainable food systems are sustainable food systems. And that is what actually the role of innovation should do. The innovation should actually help us deliver healthy diets within a sustainable food system, and not change the healthy diets to be something else because we can't deliver it with a sustainable food system. We must strive for innovative solutions that actually can help us deliver those healthy diets. And that's why new technologies, digital, that's why everything that is actually going on in the biorevolution will help us deliver those healthy diets and keep this I'm definitely for sustainable food system separate, because it really because I believe we can solve this better if we treat it as it is, because we will have the right people around the table to address the questions. I'm sorry, I have to express my opinion on that, so I did.
That's fine. I think in the end we want to achieve the same outcome, but we're coming at it from different perspectives. Maybe I can try and address some. Oh, I think John wants to come in.
John, yeah.
Well, if we can just conclude, well, not conclude, but continue on that. One of the ways to achieve a healthy diet is not related to technology, but to do with consumption patterns. And
technology, consumption, many things.
Well,
for
many of us, myself included, actually having sufficient, which means correct amount for a given purpose physiologically, is what we should be aiming for. It's in the word sufficient is in the FAO food security definition. So by managing demand better, we actually obviate the need to perpetually produce more. What we should be doing is producing less of the right stuff, more of the right stuff, less of the bad stuff.
If I can add one point to this equation, is we all know well that if we were to eat according to dietary guidelines, all of us, we don't actually produce what we need to meet those dietary guidelines. So there is a disconnect there, and of course we have to address the issue from both sides.
Absolutely.
I think we all agree on that. And it's not just about technology. Of course, it's wonderful to have, you know, these new tools and products like the ones mentioned today by our very innovative, these innovative companies. So Patricia,
Very good.
And yeah. And so those, of course, are very welcome and needed, and we need innovation there. But we also need to change behavior. We also need to change the way we think. We also need to change the way we advertise, the way we market, because we know that behavior is very, very much influenced by multiple factors. And sometimes we're not quite aware to what degree we think we have a choice, but actually we don't have that much choice. So there's also those issues to consider. I'd like to get back to some of the other questions that Schengen raised, but I realize that we only have 10 minutes left, or
I have tons of questions from the audience for the startups.
Yeah.
What would you like me to do? Shall we give the floor to the startups and I kind of just sit back, or would you like, Schengen, is there a particular question you'd like me to address in like 30 seconds?
Really, I know your point, so don't worry. I think you know, I was challenging you, not probably EC, about it, the regulations.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's coming. It's a question. It's a question that is also here, so you can address it, Karen. The regulation question is also a question that is in the audience.
Okay. Well, the regulation question is the one that, of course, I am the least competent to reply on, because from my research and innovation perspective, you know, we are open to a plurality of approaches, right? We need to test, we need to demonstrate, you know, let's do it. And then the decisions that are taken thereafter by our, you know, policy environment, of course, they look at the evidence, they're evidence-based. But there are also other issues that have to be taken into account, like food safety, like regulation that with respect to novel foods, health claims. These have to feed into the existing processes. Now we do have a tool that we use now under better regulation, where when we revise a new regulation or directive, or we try and, as part of the impact assessment process, we also try and embed what we call an innovation principle. So you probably heard of the precautionary principle. Well, we also have the innovation principles, and we try and use them together to see if there are ways in which, when we review certain regulations, for instance, is there something that could be particularly stifling to innovation that can be undone without, you know, too much risk and so on. So it's an instrument that we use through the impact assessment process. That's all I can reply on this issue without going into details. Yeah, with the farm to fork strategy, the fact that there are many actions now being investigated, being put on the table, this could provide an opportunity to rethink innovation within this new, say, modern context.
Okay, great. So Patricia and Simon, I have a list of questions for you. So there are people who are asking, how are you realistically going? When are you realistically going to be on the market?
Yeah, maybe that's a question for Karen too. And you know, I wanna pack this answer kind of with, also combine it with your question, Professor Fan, on the cost, right? So really the three major factors are cost, regulatory, and technology. What we're doing is difficult. And it's also something new for the regulatory authorities that need to assess on how to regulate it. And the other part is the cost that you mentioned, Professor Fan, and I agree. This is the first thing that we need to drive down. Nobody had to do that before because cell culture was used for biotherapeutics, and there are just a lot higher margins than there are for food products. So now we have an opportunity to really use this technology, the cell culture technology we're developing, not only for food, but in the future it will impact everyone on a much higher level. So this is a technology that is important to develop for so many reasons. And I want to encourage also the government to look more into government funding there along these lines. So speaking about that, there is an article that I'm happy to share from one of our advisors, Ron Shigeta, who wrote about how lab-grown meat is scaling like the internet, and we will see the cost come down massively with, you know, increasing the accessibility of more affordable media components and media in general, in innovation in bioprocessing. My team, we have a very solid background in large-scale biomanufacturing that will be important. It will be important for contract manufacturers to also live up to that and help us with that. So yeah, I think products on the market, I would say in 2 years.
Okay.
And
okay,
at
next
what price?
question. Yeah.
Sorry?
Next question. Next question. What price, he said. While you're thinking of the price,
you know,
I'm gonna.
Yeah, that's a different discussion.
Do you expect any health problem to the consumption of lab-grown meat or fish? Is this activity environmentally friendly? Simon?
Yes.
Or Patricia, whoever wants to take it.
I just wanted to mention, I would say the same thing that I told my grandmother when she asked me whether she can take the COVID vaccine with her condition. I have a doctor, I'm not that kind of doctor. But I'm pretty sure that the regulatory authorities will make sure that the product is safe for consumption. We will make it sure as companies, that is one of the most important things. And I don't hear enough companies talking enough about that.
Okay. When the FDA Science Board discussed cultured meats, their biggest concern was not being able to identify when traditional sources are stretched with cultured meat or vice versa. Will which will be likely to stress with the cheaper sources. The need to find an alternative medium to fetal bovine serum is crucial to make cultured meat viable. What is the process on this? The progress on this?
Oh yeah, there are two different questions packed in here. So mixing cultivated meat with regular meat, I think, you know, we had this horse meat scandal in Europe a couple of years ago, which they found out with DNA testing, that's the same thing you could do. Cultivated meat would always be the more expensive type anyway, so that could be tested fairly easily. I'm not sure what the concern is there. FBS, yes, of course, that's the first thing you need to cut out of that. But yeah, that's, I mean, biopharma is not using FBS, so I'm not really seeing the issue there. Another thing that I also wanted to mention that was interesting, because Simon brought it up in his talk also, on how to make steaks, right? And everybody's initially going for, of course, an unstructured product, which will be earlier to the market, and then for the more structured product, right? And I remember, Simon, we talked last year, but I wasn't clear that you were involved with Bluu at that time. And so I would also have a question for you. How much Orbillion Bio will be in Bluu in the end, after you did a quite extensive due diligence on us too?
Sorry, I've been actually dropping out of the conversation and trying to come back in. So I weren't able to listen to what you said before. Can you repeat that question and the context a little bit? What you expect?
Oh no, that was just a joke. But interesting for us will be also, right, how you address the piece of how to make a fish steak, right? That will be interesting to see. That was the question.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's of course a combination of the factors that I assume you just mentioned when you were talking about price, which is bringing the cost down of the media, where I actually see quite some cost drops already. I think the biggest challenge, of course, is the media itself in terms of cost, and in the media is the growth factors. And I mean, I've been watching this industry for the last 2 years, and the prices already theoretically fell by hundreds of X when you speak to executives from the large companies that produce these factors. And this is mainly because we moved from pharma grade to food grade, which has a huge impact on the price. And also we moved from tiny volumes. Right now you buy a growth factor at micrograms, which is 1/1,000,000th of a gram, right? But for the food production, we're talking about kilograms. And this changes the whole equation. So realistically, we probably will see a drop of 1000x and more in this space. And we're working with many companies and partnering with basically every week a new company that pops up globally in either the cell X space or the space that supports this development. And as our philosophy is that we don't want to reinvent the wheel, we want to work with the best in the industry out there. We partner a lot. And we can actually see how many great companies come up that work on fragments of these to get the equation done. So we firmly believe, and I personally very much believe, that we will be able to bring a product out that will be in the long run cheaper than anything that has historically been harvested, any price structure. So that, of course, is the goal of this industry, that we will be there for the mainstream, not for the premium market. If you want to move the needle, you need to be in the big markets. You need to serve to be able to serve something to every individual in the world to solve the protein challenge. And
I have one last question, which is, in how many jurisdictions, countries are cell-based meats, fish approved? Is the process clear?
No, it's not. Of course,
well, in how many countries? That should be easy.
There's one. It's Singapore, and the process is clear, and the regulatory authorities did a great job there. The process, as far as I know, still contains FBS there, but they showed that it's possible to clear that out with a purification process. And so that's just the first one that we saw being approved, and we know that Singapore, of course, does a proper process. I've been also on a conference where they talked more about how that was done. So I really think that the regulatory authorities there did an awesome job with working together also with the companies, and there may be even some more products coming soon. Maha, if you allow me just quickly, I know we briefly talked about innovation previously and how we need more innovation. I think, Simon, you also brought it up, how we need more innovation in Europe, right? And that the talent is also something that's really important. And I wholeheartedly agree. The innovation part is really important there, and the talent part. And again, I think the funding and development of the talent, development of students, development of people that are in industry to really transition into this new industry will be very important. So anyone that's listening and that has ideas for that or wants to build a program at their university, their school, whatever, I encourage you to do so and build up the network so that we have these amazing people that we can hire.
Great. I think we are at the end. I am so sorry. There are a few questions that we could not address, but I'm pretty sure that we can send them to the speakers after. If Stefan can keep the questions safe and they do not disappear from the. Thank you very much to all the speakers, and thank you for the very constructive conversation. And we tried to cover as much terrain as we could. It was a pleasure to be with you all this morning, and hope to see you soon, next time, face to face in an ILSI annual meeting.
Yeah, and I want also to thank our speaker. Thank you, Maha, for chairing this session. I invite you to join the next one. Next session is in 1 hour. Indeed, Karen, you'll be happy to see that we cover the soil microbiome. This is a topic I think you mentioned in your presentation somehow. So we are going to address that, and we have more session also on gas emission. And I think we have a very complex program this year, but I think we address a lot of very important topics. So I want to thank you all again, and I'll share with you the question we received from the audience. So I'll send it to the speakers, so you see the question we got for you. Thank you once again, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yep. All right.